Hi guys, I'm Brianna and I am doing my final presentation on the wisdom of music. So I'm a music education major, so music is an important part of my life. But I'm going to be focusing more on the performance aspect of it. So why performance? This is why, because I am in all of these pictures. I've been performing almost my entire life. I started dance when I was 4 years old, and then at 6 I was put on the competition team, so I've been performing pretty much ever since I was 4, and then I started band and choir when I was 10 years old, so music then became a very huge part of my life, and I'm still doing it. So and these are all performances that I have been in, group performances, solo, marching, a very broad range of performances. So most of what I'm going to be talking about can be applied to other areas of performance, so other performing arts, like dance, like I just mentioned. Even can be applied to athletics or academic performances like tests or presentations. Pretty much any type of performance setting. What I'm about to talk about can be applied to pretty much any type of performance setting. So a lot of people think that for performance that relies mostly on practicing, practice makes perfect, and then skill and talent. But I think what I found the biggest influence on performance are in our heads, so mental blocks. And so I kind of found 4 that really have stood out to me throughout my life performing. So those include performance anxiety, expectations, your attitude, and then ego. And each one can kind of influence the other one, or they can just kind of be separate. And I don't think all of these can be completely overcome, but definitely realizing that they exist and that they can be worked around and through can definitely help ease a performance. So the first one is performance anxiety, and according to the DSM-5, performance anxiety is a type of social phobia or social disorder characterized by the fear of performance or performing poorly. And performance anxiety doesn't discriminate between experienced and inexperienced musicians or performers. It doesn't discriminate between the genre of music, so whether you're a classical musician, a jazz musician, popular musician, or your vocal or instrumental performance primarily, anyone can experience performance anxiety. And even in other areas of performance, like other performing arts or academics, people can experience performance anxiety, also known as stage fright. And it doesn't necessarily mean that a person has medically diagnosed anxiety disorder. Anyone can get nervous in any different way before a performance, or even during a performance. And so some symptoms of performance anxiety, I have some of them up here. So shaking, difficulty breathing, increased heart rate, dizziness, or nausea. Some are more extreme than others, so even though I've been performing a long time, I still experience performance anxiety. I get really shaky, my heart pounds. Sometimes I feel really sick depending on what I'm doing. And then also I usually, my face and my arms and chest get really warm and red. It doesn't happen as badly now, but it used to be a problem, and it was very noticeable. So back to my point earlier about how anyone can experience performance anxiety. Frédéric Chopin, he was a composer back in, I think, the bridge between classical era and romantic era music. And he had performance anxiety. So he was a very famous composer, and you wouldn't think of someone like that having anxiety, but he was quoted saying, "I am not fitted to give concerts. The audience intimidates me. I feel choked by its breath, paralyzed by its curious glances, struck dumb by all those strange faces." So This kind of shows that, like I said, anyone can get performance anxiety, anyone can feel uncomfortable performing, and some people, it's just not for some people. And for a lot of performers, it can, push them away from music altogether and music making. Back to the symptoms, some more symptoms. So more mild is the shaking, sweating, blushing, like I mentioned, increased heart rate. In more severe cases, crying, some people do cry, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, and fainting. And usually more severe symptoms are experienced by people who have medically diagnosed anxiety disorder. So next, I'm going to talk about ways of overcoming performance anxiety. And this is the area that I did more research on because I didn't really feel qualified to explain how to overcome performance anxiety. So the book I used to talk about this was written by Diana Kenny, and it's called The Psychology of Music Performance Anxiety. So she did a lot of research and put together this book about what performance anxiety is and different ways to overcome it. And so first, it starts kind of with practice and preparation beforehand. I know I said earlier that performance doesn't really depend solely on just practicing, but it does help. So when we go into a performance knowing that we're unprepared, that ultimately sets us up for failure because we're walking in saying, I'm unprepared, I'm not going to do a good job. So in my studies with music, we have to practice 2 hours per day for our major instrument and 1 hour a day for our minor instrument. And when I tell people that, their eyes get all wide and they're like, that's a lot, isn't that excessive? But that much practice time allows for better development with muscle memory, so then when we perform, we can start to focus on more than just getting all the notes and rhythms right. We can actually make it a piece of music. And so when musicians practice enough to become comfortable with their music, then they can have a bit more confidence going in that it's going to be okay. And so then to go off of that kind of another way to overcome performance anxiety, physical conditioning and exercise. And that kind of includes rest and nutrition with that, but physical exercise is important because music making is a very physical process. A lot of people don't think it's physical, but it is, because you need the endurance, you need a good amount of breath support and endurance to successfully perform. And then for vocal musicians, they need to keep their voices in shape too, so that's why they drink a lot of water and everything. So then, and good physical exercise increases energy and stamina, which makes the performance ultimately easier. Because if you can't really keep your energy up, then it's just, you're going to get tired faster and you're just going to want to be done, and then it's just kind of going to snowball. And then also with physical conditioning, it's really common, especially in marching band, when you do parades, especially long parades, to in the week or two leading up, gradually increase the amount of time you spend marching in a circle, playing the same exact thing in the hot weather, or even cold weather sometimes, because our bodies aren't used to that, so that conditioning helps get us used to carrying instruments, playing over and over, breathing, taking breaks when you need to also. So then next, to kind of bounce off the physical help, is rest. And rest is important because if you don't get enough sleep, that's kind of the same thing, you're not going to have energy. Because when you're fatigued, you can't really focus, and it can also cause injury because you're not really aware of your body. So then the next one is nutrition. And so then Diana Kenny in her book quoted Bonnie Robson, who says that 2 months before the event, fats in the diet be reduced to improve body shape and increase energy, and fiber be increased to protect against stress-related gastrointestinal disturbances. So that kind of can like tie into performance anxiety about like when you're getting nauseous and your stomach hurts. Eating the right diet beforehand can help with that. And then relaxation techniques goes into psychological preparation. So meditation, some people meditate. It's a good way to relax your mind because sometimes before performances your mind can just go crazy and you don't really know what to do. A lot of times musicians will do deep breathing exercises because that'll help with their breath support during the performance. Some use essential oils and other aromatherapy to just kind of help them relax. And then others, like myself, need something to distract from like all of the noise and everything that's happening around. So relaxing soundtracks is another option. So there's a piece by the Marconi Union called Weightless, and they actually worked with therapists, sound therapists, to create this about 7-minute long piece. It's just instrumental that can reduce anxiety-related feelings. And so usually right before a performance, if I'm like sitting and waiting and like I just like feel overwhelmed, I just put headphones on and I just listen to this, and like everyone just kind of leaves me alone. So, but yeah, so these are, it starts with practice and preparation and kind of involves a lot of prep beforehand, even months before, which is usually hard to do, but is possible. Okay, so the next kind of mental block is expectations. So our expectations of a performance is just kind of what we think is going to happen, what we're expecting. And it's important as a performer to not have any expectations at all, like even positive ones. Because if you have a positive expectation, then ultimately you're just expecting that to happen, and then if it doesn't happen, you're just going to be disappointed in either yourself, or you're going to be angry at the people around you for not doing what you thought they were going to do. So say you're performing, and you do a great job and you're expecting a standing ovation and for everyone to just continue clapping for 10 minutes straight, and when everyone claps but no one stands up, that's going to be very disappointing. So that's how positive expectations can be harmful, because that can just lead to disappointment. And it kind of causes stress because the desire for recognition from others can really overshadow like any enjoyment you have for performing, if you're just worried about what other people, like how other people are going to react or what you're going to get out of it. And then negative expectations usually just causes more stress during a performance, which can ultimately lead to mistakes. And then it just turns into this vicious cycle where you become stressed, you make mistakes, and then you imagine how the audience is reacting, and then you get more stressed, and it just repeats over and over. And so for expectations, the Tao Te Ching, there's a chapter that I really like, and I thought it relates to this for expectations. So it says, "The master's power is like this. He lets all things come and go effortlessly without desire. He never expects results, thus he is never disappointed. He is never disappointed, thus his spirit never grows old." So that kind of just shows that when you go into a performance, you shouldn't expect anything to happen. And you should just go into it and say whatever happens, happens. And so then that kind of leads into attitude. So in attitude, it's almost similar to expectations, but it's more the way we feel about a certain situation. And so that can include thoughts about how we might perform, which is kind of similar to expectations, but And then whether or not the performance is worthwhile, so basically waiting and saying, you know, I don't want to be here, I'm not getting anything out of this, whether or not we want to do it, and then what we will gain from success and what we will lose from failure. A negative attitude about a performance can include the expectation of failure, but it's not necessarily an expectation. It can include the mentality that the performance is pointless, nothing will be gained, or we might put too much value on the event, thinking that we could lose way too much for it. So, for example, I recently performed in a concerto competition where I performed a concerto solo. If whoever wins the competition gets to perform with the local orchestra. And so to register you have to pay $50, and the money collectively goes towards getting the music and preparation for the performance with the orchestra. And so when I got there, I saw all the other performers, which it was 4 more. It's all people I knew, but one I know, he's an amazing pianist, and I immediately was like, well, there's no way that I can win this. Like, there's no point now, I'm wasting $50. And so this was actually before the performance. I knew he was competing, and I was like, there's no way that I'm gonna win this. And so the day of the competition, I just kind of like told myself that even if I didn't win, that the money I had spent to register would go towards music and preparations for his performance if he did win, which I was sure he was going to, and he did. And that it was still a great opportunity for me to show off like the time and effort that I had spent working on this piece. So that positive attitude I had didn't have any expectations along with it. Like, I wasn't expecting to win. I walked in saying, it's okay if I don't. Like, this is still a good opportunity, but I didn't say, oh no, it's gonna be great, I'm totally gonna win, or even get, you know, the runner-up. So I was still like detached from the results, so when they came out and they said that, you know, the pianist won, I wasn't, you know, I was happy for them, and I wasn't really upset. So then, to tie into that too, visualizing a successful performance, that's also not the same as expectations. It's really just picturing yourself performing well. It serves more as a model instead of what you think is going to happen. So it's like, instead of saying, I'm going to perform this way or I will perform this way, instead say, I will strive to perform this way. So it serves as a model instead of like an expectation, and you're not attached to the results. And you can use that also to improve upon what mistakes you made during the performance. So then the final kind of mental block is our ego. Sorry, Ian, I put a trumpet picture in the back because you know the stereotype about trumpet players and their ego. But so our ego is our sense of self-esteem or self-importance. And it kind of seems to be a common thing among musicians, not just trumpet players. I've seen it in any type of musician. It's really, going back to any performance setting too, like I've seen it in athletics, being in dance I've seen it, like the better dancers are put front and center and all the others it just kind of fans out. And so in music it shows in the position systems or the hierarchies in group performance settings, especially instrumental, because there's a lot of stress on chair placements, and that can really kind of harm the ego, because then it gives us, like, we think of ourselves as a number. Like, you know, someone whose 5th chair is like, I am the 5th best, you know, and it's really harmful for our self-esteem. So even like a positive ego can also be harmful, because then you're using that as your motivation and drive to do better in a performance and be better than someone else, instead of using your own personal development and enjoyment of music. And then also, the bigger your ego gets, the more unhappy you are when you see everyone else around you succeeding. And I've actually experienced that before. Seeing, you know, the better I do, then I see, like, even my friends, like, I hear them playing and they do something really well, and I'm like, ooh, that, like, you know, then I'm immediately like, I have to do better. But that's something that I'm still working on, and like, I'm working on hearing people around me perform and saying, yeah, that's good, and being happy for them, and it's getting better, it's getting there. And then, so, Louis Armstrong was quoted, I really like this, he says, "I never tried to prove nothing, just wanted to give a good show." So that goes into the idea that you should perform for the enjoyment of music and to share it with others, rather than having to prove something to everyone else, proving that you're the best, or, you know, showing off to other people. Music performance is really about sharing your music with other people, because if you don't have to perform for yourself, because if you don't have an audience, then there's no point in performing if you're just performing for yourself. So then to conclude, I'm still learning and growing. All musicians, even professionals who've been doing this for way longer than I have, they're still improving and growing. And for anyone else in here who performs in any way, shape, or form, just worry about your own growth, whether it's musical or not. Just enjoy what you do, worry about your own growth.